The next topic we'll be covering in the Wild Way to Lucid Dreaming is a very important topic for the book. Here, Slider discusses the differences between wilds or wake-initiated or wake-induced, depending on how you want to translate that I, but wake-initiated lucid dreams versus DILDs or dream-induced lucid dreams. And there is one part in here coming up a little bit later that kind of got me scratching my head, wondering, what exactly it is that he's talking about, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So first up, he writes, whatever lucid dreaming actually is, it seems to fall into two distinct categories, the first being much better known and written about than the second. The first is the currently more traditional and better publicized dream-induced lucid dreaming. This method of lucid dreaming involves training oneself to regain waking consciousness while already in the middle of a regular dream. And then the second one being wilds. The second method, however, is the lesser known wake-induced lucid dreaming, a simpler, and in some ways it is simpler, but it also, in another kind of very specific way, it's definitely harder, but a simpler and far more direct approach that involves entering into lucid dreaming directly without having to first fall asleep and have regular dreams. Okay, so this next part is kind of the head scratcher part for me. Picture this. At a time of your own choosing, you make yourself comfortable lying down in bed or stretching out on a couch, and this is the part, after only a few minutes of getting yourself in the zone, you then step boldly into an incredibly lucid dream that is just as real to you as the waking world. Now, that whole only after a few minutes parts trips me out and got me thinking, like, I wonder if he's talking actually about being lucid in hypnagogia, right? This stage one of sleep liminal stuff versus being lucid in a regular full-on REM style dream. And, he doesn't really provide the answer. And going off memory, I don't think he brings up hypnagogia really anywhere throughout this book. Like I said, I'm not reading ahead and trying to go through all my old highlights. I'm just kind of going through them in real time with you as I'm slowly working my way back through this book. And, I read it like a month and a half ago or whatever. Anyway, next up, he talks about what is really the biggest problem with DILDs. So with dream-induced lucid dreaming, there is really no control as such, nor technique involved besides that of the persistent effort of trying to make it happen and then hoping for the best. Like, there is absolutely some kind of luck involved in this process. DILDs is an entirely random method requiring a prolonged and protracted effort that can often take months or even years. Again, that is very, very true. It can certainly take a very long time. But the way I like to kind of approach this is you have to practice in a way. Well, first of all, you can practice both, right? Why do you only have to go for DILDs and not for wilds? But practice both. But you want to have your DILD approach, your DILD practices built into your life in a way where it's very easy for you to keep it up for essentially the rest of your life, right? You can just put like a random alarm generator on your phone, have that go off randomly throughout the day. Every time you hear it, that's your reminder to do a reality check. No matter which approach you're going with, you're going to want a dream journal anyway, right? Try to prioritize getting more sleep, which is generally good for any dream work practice. Although, as we covered at some point earlier in this book, Slider is thinking that if you can lucid dream on command when you initially start to fall asleep, then perhaps you don't even need to get that much sleep because you rest, your rest is like supercharged or whatever, right? But, all kind of simple stuff like that, like starting a meditation practice. And again, that would help whether you're pursuing wilds or DILDs. But, having a nice typical mindfulness practice can help a lot, because lucid dreaming really, at least to me, and it seems very obvious, is just a form of meditation and mindfulness in itself, where worry, it will always remain something that's completely outside of your own volitional control. Another highlight in here, ultimately the process is somewhat long and drawn out, so that most people just don't have the patience to persevere for long enough to ever realize any decent results. All right, and then now he's going to talk about wilds again. So with wilds, whether or not you lucid dream is reduced to being purely a matter of learning to become aware of the different stages of falling asleep. Okay, so he must know about hypnagogia and stage one of sleep stuff if he's bringing this up in here, but he continues, and then exploiting them to one's own best advantage. The whole emphasis of the wild technique depends entirely upon being able to gauge exactly when you have reached the required amount of physical, emotional, and mental relaxation, and then when you judge the time is right, consciously and quite deliberately stepping out into a completely lucid dream reality that to all extents and purposes appears as real as anything can be, all the while knowing that it's only a dream. And again, that part there makes me think he's not talking about hypnagogia, because typically, you know, a hypnagogic liminal dream, it's not going to be like a regular REM style dream, or be like, you know, waking reality where it seems like you're in it in the first person and, you know, all this kind of stuff. Okay, what else we got in here? I guess what really puzzles me is that, generally speaking, the vast majority of people seeking the experience of lucid dreaming all tend to go by the DILD's route instead of WILD's. I can't understand why, when it's obvious that even one single experience of WILD's is equal to many experiences of DILD's. That one also made me scratch my head, but he talks about it later, and it kind of makes it more clear to me what he was talking about. Perhaps because, for some inexplicable reason, WILD's, although known about and documented, are considered by the dreaming community to be the more difficult method of the two. I would say quite unjustifiably so. So I think the real difficult with WILD's is that you have to try and keep your conscious awareness intact as you're falling asleep, right? So that's kind of a harder thing to do, versus if you're just doing the daytime work of doing your reality checks and all that other stuff. For DILD, you just go to sleep as regular, and then you just cross your fingers and hope for the best that you will get lucid at some point randomly later on in the night, you know, in a regular dream. Okay, and so this next part kind of gets at why he compares like one wild experience to being worth many DILDs. Another distinct problem with DILDing, it's a funny way to put it, is that of not always ending up in a lucid dream in full possession of your waking memory and mental faculties. Okay, so whereas with WILD's, full lucidity and total recall are always available from beginning to end, I would dispute that part as well. With WILD's, you enter into the dreaming state with exactly the same awareness you laid down to dream with. Things like semi-lucidity do not even generally occur, other than under rather unusual circumstances. So it's true that if you have a WILD, right, and you enter from being full-on awake directly into a REM-style lucid dream, you will tend to be very lucid in those situations, right? And if you're trying to say, like, you want to try and do something specific within your lucid dream, right, it's very easy to recall that information when you have a WILD, as opposed to if, say, you went to sleep, you had this idea in your mind that you wanted to do this specific thing in your next lucid dream. 6 hours later of sleeping, you randomly get lucid within that dream. It can be quite difficult to recall, you know, all your memories from the waking life. But, you know, as your lucidity rises, you still can learn to retrieve that information. But with WILD's, it is true that when you first go in, right, it's easy to recall that information. But then as the dream goes on, you can still, even if you have a WILD, get wrapped up in the narrative and story of what's going on within the dream and lose your lucidity, right? It will go from a lucid dream into a regular dream, even though you entered it via a WILD. So I think that's kind of another important part to point out here, which he doesn't really get at. But anyway, with that said, that wraps it up. Until the next video, keep your lucid dreaming practice legit.